We are excited to begin a brand new chapter, Lamed Vav, the 36th chapter, which is in the original text, page 90, towards the top of the page. And I will suggest in the outset that because we know that the prakim, the chapters of the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, are written with a precise sequence, as I always try to remind everybody about the previous classes, that sometimes it's within a particular context, just to get an understanding, a backdrop of the previous class. So we are beginning a new chapter, but yet, as everything continues, again in the Alter Rebbe's Tanya, with a precise sequence, it's always worthwhile for all the newcomers to try to find the easy, or to remind you have the ability to find the previous classes on this website. Again, you just put in the link box Tanya, or on the tanyaonline.com. Again, hosted by Kosher Tube as well, with the ability to access very easy access to the previous classes, and namely, you can follow along with the text. Accordingly, Perek Lamed Vav, the 36th chapter. It is known here, the Alter Rebbe, this is again a very fundamental chapter, where the Alter Rebbe establishes, gives a much clarity that the whole purpose of creation, the whole purpose of why we're here in this world, based on the famous Medrash Tanchuma, which the Alter Rebbe quotes over here as the exact quote, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created this entire world. In Parashas, again, Medrash Tanchuma, Parashas Nosei, Nisav HaKadosh Baruch Hu li's le'dira b'tachtein. HaKadosh Baruch Hu had a desire to have a dwelling place, a home in this physical world. This is the reason for creation, not a dira ba'elyonim, not a dwelling place in the supreme worlds, but a dwelling place precisely in tachteinim, in this very physical, material world, which is, again, that's the reason why it's called tachton. It's not a floor, it's not dealing with a story. A spiritual world, Gan Eden, is on the higher floor, this is on the lower floor, understandably so. Tachton is by definition something which has less it's less obvious of the reality of its own reality, less obvious of its own vitality, of its own reality, which is obviously God. Godliness, there's nothing independent, it doesn't exist anything independent of Hashem. So this world continues to be created, not only created in the 6 days of creation, but on a constant basis continues to be created by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like we say in davening, every day HaKadosh Baruch Hu renews creation, revitalizes the creation, and not only every day, every second, as it's explained in a number of places. So there is nothing else other. In other words, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for example, would stop giving chayas to this cup, even at this very moment, would not decide to revitalize, to re-energize it, to invest his energy in this cup, it wouldn't be like a broken cup. The cup would literally disappear. The only existence of this cup or this table or anything else is because Hashem is pumping a chayas, a energy, a vitality to make this exist, not only alive but exist. So everything is God. So there's really, in essence, there's no difference between Gan Eden and Olam Haba or this physical world. It's all the same. In essence, it's all the same godly reality. The only thing is, there it's overt, and here it remains covert. Here it is not obvious. Here it is not, godliness is not manifest as it is Ba'alamat Elyonim, in the supreme world. And that's why it's called Tachton, and that is exactly where HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted his an abode. That's where HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted a home for himself. So everything is ultimately for this world, Olam Haba and Gan Eden, and all these spiritual worlds which are brought in a number of places. Atzilus, Briya, Yitzir, Asiya, and again, Machus Chamachus Kol Elamim, there's infinite amount of Elamis, as explained in so many places. This is all, the purpose of everything is precisely this world. This is where the purpose is, not Ba'alamat Elyonim, not in the supreme world. And here the Alter Rebbe, again, this is the basic, the basic translation of this Medrash Tanchuma, Parshas Nosei. And the Alter Rebbe in this very chapter expands and elaborates on this very Medrash. So we're going to try to see it. We're going to follow with the text. So the Alter Rebbe begins, it's known with their sages Her blessed memory tells us Shetachlis B'riyas Ha'olam Hazehu, the ultimate reason for creation of this physical world. Shenisahu Shu, Shenisah B'Kodesh Baruch Hu, Lisli Did B'Tachtein. B'Kodesh Baruch Hu had a desire, a covet, a want, a motivation, Elias Lay, to have a dira, a home, B'Tachtein, in this very lowly physical world. So he explains, in essence, V'hinei L'Shaych L'Fan V'Yisbarach Ma'ilo Mato. There's no, the notion of Ma'ilo and Mato doesn't exist by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because Ma'ilo Mato, up and down, it by definition cannot exist by God to say this is Ma'ilo and this is Mato, essentially, virtually, because you're talking about God, that He is Memale Kol Almin B'Shava, He fills all the worlds equally. In other words, you cannot say in HaKadosh Baruch Hu that He's in one place more than the other. As we mentioned, what is the definition of Ma'ilo and Mato? Like we said, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is more obvious, or less obvious, but not Chas V'Shalom to say where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is called Ma'ilo, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is less, is called Mato, Chas V'Shalom to say that how could you say HaKadosh Baruch Hu is less existent in any part, in any realm, because He fills, He is there, He is part of every, or He is every domain, every part of existence. He fills every part of existence naturally. And what part of Himself? Obviously His whole self. Where does He go? Doesn't remove part of Himself and remains be'elyon, and part of Himself remains betachton. Doesn't exist. Because Baruch Hu's etzem is everywhere. So in essence, there is no Ma'ilo Umato. The only thing is, what is, if it's obvious or less obvious. A very clear example, we say, the full moon, or the smaller moon, or the moon by its state of inception. Rather, its state of development would be more accurate. Its state of initial development, when it's a nekuda ktana, it's a small nekuda. And again, then and one understands that the moon remains always the same. It's always the same moon in the beginning of the month, in the 7th, in the 10th, and ultimately in the 15th. It's just what makes a small moon or not a small moon is to the way it appears to us. Similarly, if it's cloudy, there is no moon. They say is there a moon? There's always a moon. The question is if you can see it. But more so, even the moon itself. When you do see the moon, it appears differently in different days of the month. The moon remains the same. When we come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's not shaykh. The whole notion of Ma'ilo Mata, that He is on a higher supreme level and He is not in a lower level, or He exists less in a lower level, it doesn't exist. He's Baruch Hu, blessed be He, fills all worlds equally, understandably so. So what defines Ma'ilo Mata to say this is Elyon and this is Tachton, which the Medrash notes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted a dira b'tachteinim? Answer, the explanation to this, before HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, David was the only one. Yochid u'miyuchad means there was nothing else. Yochid means He was the only one, He was the sole existence prior to HaKadosh Baruch Hu creating the world. Now, this, it seems on the surface that now HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world is another entity. There's an Olam. Before HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, it was only God, and now there's Kaviyachal, so to say, another entity. True, He's in control. True, He is the sole energy of this entity, but apparently one would say there's another entity. You can't say He Hu Shmei B'Levad now. Only God exists. I want HaKadosh Baruch Hu said Bereshis Bara Elikim. He decided to bring creation into existence via the 10 sayings. So now creation exists. So now there's not only God, apparently not only God, but the Olam as well. So this is what we say. So he says over here that the truth of the matter, it's not so. And as we explained actually this was already an important point in just the very previous chapters, which the Alter Rebbe explained this whole notion that this doesn't, or rather starting from again the emphasis, the first time the Alter Rebbe elaborates on this point is Perek Yud Chaf Aleph, again as a follow up of Yud Ches Yud Tes. Later again in the previous chapters, he also in Lamed Gimel he emphasizes this point very strong. But here the Alter Rebbe builds up over here, and he says like this: before in other words, in these chapters, Chav Aleph, the Alter Rebbe points out that it's not so. That even after Kodesh Baruch Hu created the world, he remains the only energy. In other words, it's not a Kodesh Baruch Hu, not only energy, only existence. Only existence. The only existence is God. It means to say not that the way it appears that before Kodesh Baruch Hu created the world, it was only him, and now he created the world. There's another entity. He's in control. There's no independent entity. An entity which is dependent, but an entity there is. And one would say things have changed. Here you were yourself, now there is a world. This is what we say every single day in davening, that you, prior to creation, after creation, it's exactly the same you. It's just you decided to put on a certain layer, a certain cover, a certain garment, which is again the garment of Elam Hazeh, but nothing has changed. To say the Eibishter is just all the way up there and not down here. So to say the Eibishter, when we say Ato, just like in this very place, like right now where we sit, there's a table, there's a chair. What was here 5,775 years before this? There was nothing. We can't imagine what nothing means because we're part of this something. We can't imagine what does it mean prior to time. Isn't the clock ticking? No. Time is a creation. Place, Mokim, is a creation. So we can't really adequately imagine it. It's a mind-boggling issue. Topic rather, understandably, because we're again part of the fabric of time and place. The production of time and place, part of time, the notion of time and place. But one thing is clear: before Kodesh Baruch Hu created the world, it was all God. That same energy exists right now. Yet naturally, if you think about it profoundly, a little bit, but that's the point. That's the word of Yiras Shamayim, that a person has to understand that God is a here and now entity, is here now. Not Maila, but right here. But that's what we say every single day. There's no two entities. Before Kodesh Baruch Hu created the world, Hayush Megilvad, it's all the same. So the Alter Rebbe begins over here, and again there he explained it in Chav Aleph, and again this mentioned the chapter, a number of places. Alter Rebbe alludes to it, beginning to that chapter Lamed Gimel, the emphasis to bring out within ourselves that the Amunah and the Simcha and Avodas Hashem and so on. But let's see what the Alter Rebbe is getting at over here in this context. Before HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world, there was only one HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, HaKadosh Baruch Hu rather was one. Say it clear. He filled this very place, which me and you are sitting at this very time, which he created this world. He fills this very place where this world is created. Shall we know? It's not something of the past, which we can obviously understand and appreciate, because what was here was only God. So we shouldn't think that then it was only a Kodesh Baruch Hu. Now there's another entity, again, even a dependent entity, and a 100% dependent entity. Like we said, if a Kodesh Baruch Hu doesn't vitalize this very cup or anything else in this moment, it just ceases to exist. Not a broken cup or broken table, it ceases to exist, which shows its total, absolute dependent in a Kodesh Baruch Hu, but yet an entity one might think it is. Answer is, V'kam Ato Kain. Now it's also so fun of his Baruch, the way it's by Kodesh Baruch Hu, that there's no difference between before Kodesh Baruch Hu created the world and after we created and after he created the world. It's the same boy, Kodesh Baruch Hu, it's all the same. The only thing is that similar like we say, from the perspective of the moon, it's always a full moon. The only difference is the difference is to the ones who receive Chayusei, to the people on the other side of the coin. Those who receive the chayes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, those who receive the Eris Baruch, the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they receive through many garments, which cover up and obscure the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Like it says, that man cannot see HaKadosh Baruch Hu and continue to live. Meaning to say, so how is it possible that we do exist in the face of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in the core essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which exists now exactly the same way as prior to creation. And one thing we do understand and appreciate that had we been, you think of yourself, imagine yourself prior to the moment prior to creation. The moment prior to creation really is not correct, because there's no moment prior to creation, because moment is a part of creation. But let's think about this conceptually. Prior to creation, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu was memalid kol hamakom hazeh, everything with HaKadosh Baruch Hu filled the entire place. If I was here, which again, it's an example or conceptually saying and thinking, I wouldn't be able to exist because I would be completely consumed into the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Imagine the sun. The sun is all the way up there. If you imagine the sun over here, it wouldn't be a mitzias, it would be a possibility anything else can exist in the face of the hot boiling sun. We would be consumed and burnt within a split second, a millisecond, maybe even less, into the burning in the fire of the sun. And if it's the sun, which is again a creation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the whole HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the infinity of God, the infinite God is in this very place. So I would be consumed. The finite cannot stand in the place, in the face of infinity. Be completely consumed into the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And again, it's not an accurate example for many reasons, because the whole notion of finitude, it's not that I exist and then I would be consumed into the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When you have the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, nothing could exist. So everything would be consumed. Again, it wouldn't be even to be consumed, but just as an example, in the face of the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, nothing can exist. So how is it that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we say HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kein Hu Ato, Mishenivra Olam, it's the same Ato, how could we continue to exist? Answer, because from our perspective, we don't see it the way it is, truly is. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu established Levushim, Rabbim, Mesachim, different garments which cover up as mitzvahs, which his mitzvahs didn't change. From his side of the coin, it's exactly the same. He placed different garments which would cover up and obscure this light in order for us to exist. Because without that, Kilei Ani Ha'adam B'Chai. Understandably, in the place of infinity, nothing could exist. Nothing could exist. So there are, from the perspective of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's exactly the same. The only thing is, from our perspective, again, there's just levushim, rabbim, mesachim. There's different garments and which conceal the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in order that we could be, literally, we can exist and do what we have to do. It's similar to this. We gave an example a few times. It says a Rav and a Talmid, a master and a pupil. This great genius, which sits and learns for himself, by himself, not even willing to deal with another party, especially a party which is a newcomer to the whole. To this intellectual concept which he's involved with, may it be Torah, would be to get to Torah Hashem. He's a goy, and all of a sudden he's told to teach a 5-year-old Mishnayos. You can imagine how much he has to condense and conceal, contract his great his light, in other words, his amkos, his depth, in order to start dealing with the Talmud, with the student. And he has to begin with things which are very simple, extremely, extremely simple. Perhaps even stories, different parables, to start introducing to him what the Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebal Peh and Mishnayos and so on and so forth. Now someone walks into the room for a moment and he looks at the interaction between this Rav and this Talmud, and he's going to hear, he's telling him a nice story, a mashal, a medrash. Also Torah Hashem obviously has the sanctity, but a simple relating to something on a simple level. He's going to think he's a storyteller, great storyteller. He's not going to be able to pinpoint that you're dealing with a goy neilam, and it was profound, in-depth thinker. And for that matter, and this is where this becomes a mushal to this, what he's saying over here, did anything really change in the Rav, in the master? Did he become a storyteller? That all his great, his capacity to understand these profound levels, did it go anywhere? Did his seichel remove itself somewhere? It's not here, it doesn't exist within his system? Absolutely not. In the moment's notice, even less. And this would be his real life. Tell him to give a profound shir to Talmidim Mitsuyanim, to exceptional Talmidim, he'll do it on the spot. Nothing has changed within the Rav. The fact is that he knows that he has and for that matter, if he would convey his amkos, his depth to the Talmud would be completely lost. He wouldn't know what he was talking about. He'd be consumed, completely annulled into the experience, meaning to say, into this entire experience of if this master would convey everything which he has in his mind, or the way he understands the Torah which he's trying to convey. He would be lost, completely lost, similar again to the notion which I said before, the finite in the face of the infinite. Again, not accurate, but you get the understanding. You understand that this is the similarity. Like the finite cannot stand in the face of the infinite. The Talmud, if you only hear the Rab, the way he expressed himself, where he is holding his level, he would be completely lost. He wouldn't even be able to tap into anything. So the Rab does, he conceals, he puts on different garments on his knowledge, on his amkos, on his depth, on his in-depth way of thinking, in order to convey to the child, to feed spoon the child different concepts, and eventually he'll learn with him enough. He'll start tapping in to his understanding of the matter, a bit by bit, ultimately to appreciate the way he understands the Gemara and anything which he is teaching him. Similarly, so again, but B'tzad Sheni, on the other hand, nothing changed within the Rab. And this is what he's saying. Nothing changed. Atu Shalini B'Olam was only God. Now it's the same thing. There doesn't exist any other entity from the perspective of God. It's all God exactly the way he was before creation. The only thing is, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted a Dira B'Tachtein, he wanted a world to exist. So similar to the Rav and Talmud, the master and the pupil, he puts on different layers over himself in order that there can be, in order that a world, layers meaning to say levushim, garments, which again obscure and conceal his great infinite light, in order there could be an olam. So the whole difference is from the perspective of the recipients, not from the perspective of God. And similar to the Talmud, he has to identify this person in the very beginning, in the onset of his relationship. In other words, his climbing the ladder of intellectuality, of knowledge. It has to be in a way of a story. He has to look at his master and try to, yes, he is telling me a story, a beautiful story or a parable, and that's the way he has to look at his Rav, he's relating to him as a parable. And to appreciate that and to understand that, and then eventually the Rav will teach him more and more what's behind the parable, and so on and so forth. Similarly, HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world that in the onset it has to be a olam, which is again defined by tacht, meaning to say not chas v'shalom there's less here, is exactly the same, similar to the Rav is exactly the same Rav prior to dealing with his pupil and after he sits down with his student. From the perspective of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the same. The only thing is, we, on the other hand, we see through these garments which allow us to exist. But again, we'll add, which this is the point, just like the Rab, this master, the point of this interaction is that the Talmud should start understanding deeper and deeper, and ultimately to connect to the Seichel HaRav, K'moshe the way it is, as the Gemara says, sometimes it could take 40 years. That it could take 40 years till he chabzach. He could understand, start appreciating the Torah of the Rav, or the Seichel of the Rav, the intellect, the perception, the way the Rav looks at things, the master looks at things. And similarly, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us, in the very beginning he created an Olam HaTachton, but he wants us to eventually to start looking for him, and finding him, and understanding and appreciating with our mind on the other side of the curtain, or on the other side of the coin. Yes, this is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and start appreciating the way the Eibishter is, truly is, without any garments, without any cover-ups. That's the point, that the Tachton should appreciate the emes Hashem la'elam, the emes which always existed. In other words, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's reality, which is always part and parcel of creation. But we have to. The point is that eventually we should chap that. We should ultimately appreciate it the way it is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's perspective and point of view, which again is the same matter. So he says, Shashina el Mekablim. That even malachim, the celestial beings, which are all spiritual, they can't also see the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu is for himself, by himself, and others, the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Ein Sof of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because despite their spiritual beings, they're spiritual creatures, created beings and entities, yet in the same token, and they are not infinite. They don't. There's no comparison, understandably, of the infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to the spirituality, or the non, so to say, that sense of bligvul, so to say, in comparison to the hagbala, to the physicality, the finitude which we have in this physical world. The Malach transcends that, but yet in the same token he's a created entity and created being. You can never, there's no comparison of Beit and Ivra, creator to creation as refined and as spiritual as the created entity is, similar to the angels. So even angels cannot see the Ein Sof, the true infinity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We'll stop over here for today, but I hope that we're getting we're getting a little bit the message, and we're able to put together this, appreciate what the Alter Rebbe is telling us, that ultimately the Eibishter created the world that it should appear a tachton, but eventually, similar to the master sitting with the Talmud, he in order for him to relate to the Talmud, in other words, the master has also an objective that the Talmud, the student, should elevate himself to the Dargas Harav, in other words, come close to himself, in other words, to the way he perceives the concepts he's relating to, in other words, to elevate himself to the world of Chachma, to the world of intellectuality, and become, or again in the context of Torah learning, he wants him to become a Talmud Chacham, to have a comprehensive understanding of Torah, Talmud Torah, the greatest mitzvah of all. But for that, he needs, when he sits down with him, he cannot convey him these understandings, his insight, the way he understands it. The Talmud would completely lose himself. The student would lose himself. So he sits down and he kind of blocks out the way he perceives things, in order that the Talmud should be able to relate to him, or to exist, to relate to him, to relate to the topics that he's conveying to him. Like you find in the Torah, a mashal here, a mashal there, because the insight itself is a bit too profound, so the Torah itself gives a mashal, an example, a parable, and that's what he relates to him, a story, a mashal, and slowly but surely, in other words, in the onset, he remains a tachton, not understanding, not appreciating the darga, the level, and the realm of the Rav. But the whole point of it is to start removing these layers, and to be able to enter into the seichel k'meishahu, the way it is, and ultimately appreciate the Torah. Again, we'll stay with the Talmud Torah instead of any other intellectual concept. Let's stay with the Talmud Torah, but exist in any other concept. But in this case, in the example we're giving, to understand and appreciate Torah the way one day, like this master understands Torah. And similarly, this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu have in mind. In one hand, he created a world of tachton, many garments, many layers, just for the world to be able to exist. Other than that, it can't exist. Again, the finite cannot stand in the face of infinite. From the perspective, conversely, from the perspective of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's exactly the same. HaKadosh Baruch Hu creates a world of tachton. He wants us to take off these layers, layer after layer, and eventually to have an appreciation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to misyachid HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to understand the Ein Milvadi on our own, to understand that Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that the way it is that we should be able to appreciate the emes Hashem La'el, the reality, exactly the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the way it is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's perspective, from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's side of the coin, which there is no difference prior to creation and after creation. And that's the whole purpose of HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the world. And that's why He gave us a Torah and mitzvahs, and through it, because of every limit Torah and everything mitzvahs, we're getting closer. We connect to the infinite, and ultimately be able to see when Mashiach comes, see eye to eye. Ki ayin bi ayin yiru, and that as the pasuk says in Yeshaya, that we'll be able to see literally eye to eye with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to see reality the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees reality, to appreciate reality the way it is from the perspective of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the whole purpose of creation. So the Alter Rebbe is going to, besides telling us and explaining us so beautifully and eloquently this message, the Alter Rebbe is telling us, because this is the purpose of creation, dafka down here in Elam Hazat Tachtin. So and this is why they created everything, including Elam Haba, including Gan Eden, including Gan Tachtin, in all these different levels of Gan Eden, and all these different levels of Elam Haba, is ultimately because he had this taiva, he had this desire to have an abode dafka down here, and a home dafka in this physical world. So everything falls pale, if you will. You could even say it so starkly. In HaKadosh Baruch Hu's connection falls pale in all these Elam Yisrael supreme worlds, to the way Elam in Elam HaTachton, to the way it is in this physical world. The objective is right over here. Because that's where Nisa, that's why that's the reason why he created everything. That's where HaKadosh Baruch Hu's taiva. So, in when you want to say the connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what is closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Olam Haba, Gan Eden, or this physical world? It's obviously this physical world. That's a reason for this edifice. Now, there's another part of the edifice, but the whole reason why HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the whole purpose of creation, again, including Olam Haba and Gan Eden, is for this physical world. Olam Hazeh Tachtin. So that's where you have the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, precisely over here. Again, this is the follow-up. There's a few examples, perhaps maybe we even gave in the past. We'll look forward to giving it next week to clarify this point. In Be'etzim, it's a Mishnah, Pirkei Avos, that it says the pleasure of the neshama in Elam Haba is obviously there's no comparison. Yafa sha'achas be'elam haba mikol chayil mazeh. Person have all the delicacies and pleasure in this physical world without any bumps, which was almost non-existent. It's almost not. It probably never existed. There shouldn't be any bumps in a person's life. But let's say a person has a full life only of delicacies and pleasure without any problems. One moment in the world to come, the pleasure, one moment of the world to come overrides everything, is greater than all the pleasures and delicacies of this physical world. That's when it comes to pleasure. The tainig of the nivra, the pleasure of the created entity, us, our neshamas. The Mishnah continues as Yofa Shachas b'tshuva ma'asmitem be'elam hazeh mikol chayil haba. One moment of tshuva, one moment of a good deed, a good mitzvah. Ramishna in Torah, this physical world, is greater than the kol chayil haba, the entire world to come. How does that work? This is the message here. We'll look forward to continuing. Have a wonderful night.